Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Block, presented by Around the Block Sports Network. It's been a while, but we're back, and we're actually getting ready to do something pretty exciting, which is kind of introduce ourselves into a nice little hockey topic here and potentially a new podcast for us too, Sam and I. And really excited to get back into the groove of things. But first off, Sam, it's been a while. How have you been, buddy?
Have been good. The hockey season's been off to a great start so far, and I'm just happy to be here enjoying it.
Yeah, I know. Lots of games going on, and just really at a really crucial point in the season where you start to see teams making a run to potentially be a playoff team. Can they hold it or will they drown?
hmm
Really interesting stuff. And then also just really good to see these young players, just how well they're doing for their organizations. And, we've obviously have talked a lot of hockey, you and me, on this show before. And the one thing we were talking about before the season started were how are these teams going to end up in their division, where they were going to finish in their standings. And I feel like it's only natural for us to kind of see where we are right now with that picture. So let's get into it right now. We're going to start off with the Atlantic for this show, and we're going to show you guys the standings right now as of today. And Boston is leading the Atlantic Division right now, also the best team in the NHL right now, point wise. And I, for one, will start it off and say I did not see this coming whatsoever. I obviously had Boston being in the mid pack of the division this year. I just thought they were getting a little bit older, maybe not necessarily balancing out the younger talent with the older talent. Were they going to be able to produce as much? But it seems to me that they are producing just fine. And I think also it comes from excellent goaltending. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone could have expected 28 wins in 35 games. I mean, that's just historic stuff. But giving them the benefit of the doubt, I think I was predicting them to be a fifth place team, I think, in this division. And what I was predicting was a slow start from their team because of some injuries, that being McAvoy and uh, Brad Marchand were both out to start the year with injuries. I thought with Bergeron being a year older, Krejci coming back but still being a year older, I thought their production was going to tail off. I didn't trust the depth. Guys like Jake DeBrusk, Charlie Coyle, I didn't think they'd be as productive as they have been. I've been wrong on all those fronts. First off, McAvoy and Marchand were back much sooner than expected. I mean, mid-November for off-season surgery. Guys like Bergeron and Krejci have not fallen off all that much. They've been spectacular. Taylor Hall and David Pastrnak have been elite players. Specifically, David Pastrnak has been MVP worthy good. And then their depth scoring, like Jake DeBrusk and Charlie Coyle, have been really solid and productive. So all those things that factor in, all those maybe question marks, have all turned out great for Boston. I mean, beyond what anyone could have expected. We thought their defense would be good. Of course, it has been. Their goaltending has also been good, but this offense is firing at a crazy rate.
Yeah, to me, it's so like just insane to see the production value they get from anybody they bring in. It seems that Boston is just that type of organization that always demands excellence and they play hard no matter what. Years and years ago, I would never think Taylor Hall would be somewhat of a chippy physical guy here and there when they need him to be, but apparently he will on the Boston Bruins. I think it just fits their characteristics a lot better. But you also look at like his stats too. They're not bad. I mean, he's got 27 points in 35 games. I believe 13 goals on the season. That's
Yes.
perfect. That's perfect for a guy that they brought in for essentially not a lot of money, and they're getting a lot of production from their lower lines too, like you were saying. I also think personally it's their goaltending. They're really treating the rest of the team very well, coming up with some big saves and crucial games. But I think at the end of the day, the one thing that I underestimated in this team was it's the characteristic of the Boston Bruins to be a hardcore team. They'll beat you physically, but they'll also play the game smart and not take a lot of penalties. And for some reason, I thought once they lost their coach in this offseason, I thought it was going to be over for them. But clearly,
Mhm.
I was wrong.
Yeah, you touched on the goalies. So their goalie tandem of last year, Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman, still intact, but Linus Ullmark has taken the clear step forward. Jeremy Swayman was the rookie sensation last year, and he's been solid. 902 save percentage, 2.57 goals against. Linus Ullmark has been generational. He has 1.9 goals against average and 938 save percentage in 24 games. He's 20-1 in those games. That is just crazy. Or 21-1. One overtime loss, one loss. That's just crazy stuff. I mean, that's like Carey Price winning MVP level numbers. That's prime Patrick Waugh numbers. That's, I mean, hopefully not sustainable for the rest of the league, but I think that goes to show just how unbelievable they've been. And you mentioned Bruce Cassidy leaving. I thought that would be a huge, huge loss for them. I think we all forgot Jim Montgomery is a great coach. I mean, he left the Dallas Stars in 2018, I think it was, and they were an amazing team. I mean, they had that cup run with him gone. I think people kind of forgot how great that Dallas Stars team was with him at the helm. He is a very good coach, and he's showing it again this year. They've been just an unbelievable surprise.
Yeah, and as of right now, I don't see any sense of them falling off relatively soon. As long as I mean, they could go through maybe a 2 game like slump or something like that, but it's not going to change the outcome of their season, their outlook. I mean, especially with the production they've had from their bottom 6 guys and just the way they play. I think they play a very clean game as well from time to time. So I think nothing but greatness for the Bruins for the regular season. Obviously, playoffs will be a different story, but I think they're right now the front runner to, go ahead and easily win this division. But obviously, we have to look at the other teams below them. I mean,
Mhm.
you got Toronto and Tampa Bay. I mean, they're pretty far behind. They got to get some huge momentum going, and when they play the Bruins, they got to make sure they capitalize. But if we're looking at this overall, just schedule, and we're looking at the lineups here in this division, there's some teams that we just don't see in the top 3, and obviously some teams that we thought were gonna do a lot better. I know one that was the Ottawa Senators for you. You thought they were gonna bump up a little bit, in the standings, right now at 7, but I think the main one we gotta talk about here is your Florida Panthers, and to me, I'm not too worried about it yet. I think there's still a lot of time, but I wanna get your thoughts on it, you being the Panthers guy, and I know you've been to a couple games recently.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think the Florida Panthers we have to talk about. They've been a pretty disappointing team so far, not just for me, I'm sure for the league. There's a few things that we can attribute here. One is just the health, right? They've missed a lot of guys. A lot of guys have missed lots of games. Duclair still hasn't played this year. After having an Achilles tear in the offseason. He'll be coming back soon. That should help. Another thing is just some bad luck. They've had just some pucks go in that shouldn't have, some pucks that should have gone in haven't. That stuff happens in the season. Just worth mentioning. Another thing is goaltending, right? There are two goalies. We have Sergei Bobrovsky now, age 34. He's starting to fall off, and you are starting to feel it. I mean, his numbers have not been good this year at all. And then the other one is Spencer Knight, who has had some great flashes this year, no doubt, but is still a young goaltender. He's 21 years old, and the consistency isn't there. So every great shutout performance he'll let in 4 on 20 shots the next night, and those are just games you lose, right? And that's just part of the whole formula here for the Panthers is if you can't rely on your goaltending, you're not going to win games as good as they've been, as good as their underlying numbers have been this year, and they have still been good. They're still putting up lots of shots. They're still controlling possession at a pretty strong rate. And Matthew Tkachuk, their big offseason addition, has been stellar. But the reason they're not winning, I think, is on the margins.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And kind of to touch up on Matty Tkachuk there, I think he is such a crucial part of this team in the sense of why I'm not counting them out yet, is because when it comes to these big division games and you need a little spunk going on, you need something to turn around or hype up maybe your goaltending or your defense if they're struggling in a game. Matty Tkachuk's going to get into the head of the other team and really be able to do what he does best, also producing at a very high level this year, in my opinion, as well. But also, I just think they're a team that's just too good right now to be where they're at. And slowly, I think as the season continues to go on, they get more of these divisional matchups. I think they'll be able to squeeze out some points, win some games, and slowly start to creep up the ladder. I mean, you look at, I would say, a team like Detroit. I think they're great. They've had a really good offseason. I don't know if they're going to be able to sustain where they're at right now, Other than that, you look at Toronto, I think they're going to be right there, probably at the 2 seed towards the end of the season. Tampa Bay, I mean, they can go up and down as we've seen throughout this season. Obviously, they've been doing really well recently, but I think they're a team that has just gotten through the end of their run where it's been making consistent Stanley Cup finals and just making the playoffs. I think they're a team that can easily fall off. I think Florida, just because of the team that they've become as of recent, they can slowly step into that position. So I'm not too worried about the Panthers, like you said, with the young goaltender and Spencer Knight. I think it just takes them a couple games. I mean, it's getting used to the NHL pace too, which is so drastic compared to what they've been doing and whatever type of career development they've been in, whether it's the Ontario Hockey League or college, whatever it is. So I'm not totally down on them yet. Plus, I don't think Ottawa and Montreal are going to be those teams to make a push in the end. The one team, though, I do kind of, think about is Buffalo coming up
Hmm.
here. And I think they're in a good groove right now. They got to overcome some things down the road here when they come to tough scheduling, but they're slowly there. But going back to the Panthers real quick, I don't really think we have to worry about it yet. I'm not putting a panic button out there. What do you think?
Absolutely. Let's be clear. Not all hope is lost for this Panther season. There's still plenty of time and opportunity for them to turn this around. Like we said, their underlying numbers are strong. They control possession and they get good chances consistently. Some things we have to touch on, some stats from goaltenders. Spencer Knight has started 15 games, has a 910 save percentage, which is pretty solid, right? That's not bad for a 21-year-old goaltender. It's just a consistency because he has these great games and these terrible games. You need somewhere in the middle for him, and that's something that's going to develop. Sergei Bobrovsky, on the other hand, starting 21 games, has an 897 save percentage. That's just not good enough. And for a guy you're paying $10 million, we've beaten this to death. It's not. It's just an absolute hamstring for your team and for your organization to have this guy on your roster, just being not even a good enough backup, right?
Yeah.
So that's got to have to change. And some other things I think Aaron Ekblad is struggling with this new system. He's a minus 11 on the year. He's just not been as solid defensively as he needs to be. I think the system is honestly Paul Maurice's system, specifically who's the new coach. It's an adjustment for this team, right? I think you could see in the first two periods they're playing like they used to play. Speed, pace, shots, controlling play, all of that. What changes is in that third period when Maurice likes to play defensive shutdown hockey, and this team is not really equipped to do that yet. And I think Maurice is trying to install the type of philosophy that goes far in the playoffs, which is score early and shut down. And that's admirable. I get it. I don't think it fits this team right now. I think the players on this team are run and gun, fast paced, keep attacking no matter what. And if they can sort of maybe buy in more to this defensive style, they can win more. Or Maurice has to change his approach and allow them to attack more in the third period and early in the second. That's the way to make this going and not just protect leads, but expand on them.
Yeah. And like you were talking about Aaron Ekblad, kind of just at a weird pace, like kind of going through this offense and stuff here. I think of another defenseman in Brandon Montour. I mean, you were
Mm,
there. I believe you were at the game the other night against the Canadians.
yes,
I mean,
we can talk on that later.
tell me about what you saw in Montour's game. I mean, he had 3 assists on the night and just an absolute ass kicking. I
Yeah,
will say.
if you want to be,
I think he's a great piece, but I
oh,
want to
he's
get
great.
your information on it. Obviously, I'm familiar with him, just his day with the Ducks, but then also playing for the Sabres a little
Mhm.
bit. And now that he's on a team like the Florida Panthers, you can really see his elite potential that he has. So I want to get your insight on the player that Brandon Montour is.
Yeah, absolutely. Brandon Montour has been a very good surprise this year. If you want to be optimistic about the Panthers, you look at last night against Montreal, first time they've been healthy in a while, and they thumped them 7-2. It wasn't even a contest, right? That's what you're looking at. And Brandon Montour, I think, has been a really nice bright spot also, right? He's actually third on the team in points as a defenseman. And
Yeah.
that's a huge testament. He's 30 points, 6 goals, 24 assists in 34 games. What you see from him is a guy that's not afraid to move the puck and not afraid to shoot it He's a pretty strong power play quarterback. He's very, very offensively attuned. I think the Panthers need to use that more. They also have another guy, Gustav Forsling, who's similar, right? He doesn't have the same production, but I think he's even a little stronger defensively than Montour is, because Montour does give up chances, admittedly, on the defensive end, but I still think he's a positive player. Same thing with Forsling, who's 5 goals and 18 assists in 36 games, so that's 23 points in 36 games. He's a plus 15 on the year. So those two guys have been really strong in this year. I think you lean into those guys more, and that's what you look for going forward is your defensemen who push the puck forward and look not just to score but to create for others. I mean, those are the types of guys that I think really can improve this team.
Yeah, and you know what? That's why I'm not counting them out yet. I think they have too many pieces and a lot of unexpected players producing at a pretty decent level this year.
Hmm.
So I'm not counting out the Panthers. But let's get into the number 5 position right now. My
Hmm.
team here, Buffalo Sabres, and this has just been a awesome season as a Sabres fan to watch in general because you get to see a rebuild slowly start to get a little kickstart. And for me, I think the reason why they were struggling so hard in the past was a couple of things. And I'll mention, I think it was a lot to do with goaltending. They had Comrie before his injury, and he just wasn't getting the job done each and every night, facing a lot of shots. Also, too, I think Craig Anderson, good, decent goaltender for a team like the Sabres, but just not a starter. So obviously he isn't the man to be in the net. So they bring up one of their young guns in Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and man, did he have a rough start, a
Yeah.
rough start. As of late, though, he is playing at a really high elite level. And I think that has to do with just getting used to the locker room. I mean, this is just a bizarre group you got right now and a bunch of young kids just trying to figure out how to play in the NHL. And if you look at their second line, technically, of JJ Paterka, Dylan Cousins, and Jack Quinn, you watch those guys play, which I believe they're all under the age of 21, if I'm correct. They are just a fantastic group to watch in the sense of being young, but you watch them learn the game each and every game as they get used to the NHL level. And they're producing at high levels too. Outside of that, though, I mean, you got to look at their top line. Tage Thompson has just become a huge monster in this league. It shows that he can score at any time. He can take over a game. Nobody ever thought we were going to say Tage Thompson was going to become a player who can single-handedly take over a game. We've seen it. We've seen it in multiple games this year. And also, you have Alex Tuck and Jeff Skinner right next to him on that line. They just put the puck in the net, which a lot of these players didn't have in the past. So, with those two lines popping, a lot of production has been going on. I believe the Sabres may be like the third best scoring team in the league right now. That is unheard of. Nobody saw this coming whatsoever. So that is huge. And I think Don Granado, even though I'm not a huge fan, just in his tactics of bringing up players, the way he sets them up with different veterans to play with, especially younger guys. I think he's doing a decent job right now in the sense of making sure and telling his guys, "Hey, we're young, we're learning, we're getting experience in the league, and yeah, there's gonna be bad nights, but when we put it together and play for 60 minutes, we can do great things," which we've seen. And I think also a lot of it has to do with Rasmus Dahlin stepping up this year, not only being a high scoring defenseman, but just becoming a physical defenseman. A lot of times this year, he has laid his body out, and you really don't want to see that for a first overall pick offensive defenseman. But this man is not taking anything from any other player, no matter who you are. He will go in there and give you an extra spray with the skates. He'll nudge you with the stick. He's becoming a little bit feisty of a guy, which I think Buffalo needs. And on top of that, you've got in the second pairing of defense, Owen Power, last year's first overall pick. And man, he is just slowly getting better. Still doesn't have the NHL muscle, but you can tell this guy is going to be really good with years to
Hmm.
come. So I think the only thing that's going to keep the Sabres back is injury. I think if they get caught with an injury bug, I don't know if they have the depth yet to quite continue what they've been doing. We saw them lose 8 games in a row this season, and that's when they lost their second defenseman, Matthias Samuelson, who is a fine addition, getting him under contract. So, really quick, I want to get your insight. What do you think of the Sabres?
Yeah, you touched on their depth, and I think that's a super interesting point. They have 5 players at or above point per game, that being Tage Thompson, Jeff Skinner, Rasmus Dahlin, Alex Tuck, and Dylan Cousins. So those 5 guys are right at or above a point per game. Everyone else doesn't even have 20 points on the year. So I think that shows just how lopsided I think their depth is. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing right now for them. I just think it's a very unique thing, right? Because they have these really dynamic, interesting defensemen, Darlene, Power, Samuelson, and they have this guy in the middle, Tage Thompson, who, I mean, he answered all questions about being a 1C, right? 50 points in 33 games, that's your first line center for the future, and you got him locked up. Congratulations to you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah, we're feeling really good about it.
Yeah.
It's fun to watch, and man, I mean, I'll say I just haven't seen a big man move the way he does and read the level of game and the ice like he does, and it's just mind-boggling to me. I
Oh
mean, this guy's putting out dangles like I'm gonna say it, he's putting dangles out like McDavid does.
yeah.
And for him just being that tall, I'm not saying he's producing like as much as McDavid or he is McDavid,
Pretty close
but
production
for
wise.
how big of a guy he is, just how how fast he can move. The kid's phenomenal, and I think it's really good the Sabres got him under contract. Really quick, going back to the depth thing,
Mhm.
um, the reason why I'm so in the air on how the season's going to go forward is if they lose one guy on that top six, it has been shown in the past that due to injuries, if they break up those top 6 in that lineup, the production goes down
Mhm.
tremendously. So that's what I still need to see, if it does occur this season, if they start losing players. Other than that, though, I mean, the past couple games, they're slowly starting to get production from their bottom 6. The other night, they had a big win against the Detroit Red Wings, and Casey Middlestat and Kyle Okposo. Middlestat with 2 goals, Okposo with a hat trick. I mean, that's unheard of. I think it's Okposo's first hat trick with the Sabres, and he's been there for like 8 years. Absolutely crazy to think about. So it's slowly starting to come into production level. And I honestly didn't think they were going to be doing as well after being off for 9 days due to a bad storm in Buffalo. They obviously came out last night, but they will be tested tomorrow when they go to Boston and
Mhm.
play the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, and they have, I think, what they need foundation wise. I just don't want them to rush anything. We saw them make this mistake with the last iteration of this team with the Eichel team. They signed these veterans and they just don't produce the way they did. Kyle Okposo is a great example. Coming from the Islanders, strong goal scorer, constant offense, falls off a cliff when he gets into a team without a proper infrastructure. Guys, and then same thing with Jeff Skinner, who was a 40 goal guy in Carolina. Not the same guy. Obviously, he's starting to rebound a little bit now that there's some infrastructure around him. But the point remains, you cannot rush this. You have a great, solid foundation. Keep building it. Be patient. Got to get your defensemen seasoned and got to get them playing good, strong defense. You see Darlene and Power starting that. They're not at the shutdown level yet. I'm curious from your perspective, what I see missing right now, not just depth, is some elite wing talent. You have some good top 6 talents. I wonder if guys like Quinn or Middlestat or Cousins can develop into an elite winger. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you right now, just based off the kid line, as they call it, the
Mhm.
Paterka, Cousins, and Quinn line, those guys playing together is phenomenal because you get to see their young minds just work on the ice. I do think Dylan Cousins has taken a massive step becoming that secondary center. He is just a big physical guy, and the three feed off of each other so well. And throughout the season, before they started getting on these little win streaks and having good months during the 8 game losing streak, it was because they broke that line up. They weren't letting those young guys feed off each other, putting slower guys up there like Kyle Oposo or Zemgus Girgensons, just older guys that necessarily shouldn't be playing with these young, talented kids. And I think right now, like I said, Dylan Cousins is going to be that guy who's going to blossom in the second half of the season when we hit it. You'll see what he truly means to this team. Other than that, I mean, you look at Paterka and Quinn, these guys are having phenomenal seasons. I believe they're at 17 points each right now or something like that.
Yep.
And for two rookies, that's awesome. And they're on a line of their old man is Dylan Cousins, and the kid's only like 23 years old, 22 years old. That's insane. And honestly think that yes, maybe not this season of being elite. Give it like 2 more years. Get these guys in their young mid 20s. You'll see something phenomenal coming out of Buffalo.
Pretty amazing that Peyton Krebs wasn't the steal of that Eichel trade. Kind of a
Yeah,
throw-in the way we thought Tage Thompson would be.
yeah. Well, it's what also too, a lot of people in the Buffalo media have been talking, and it's so crazy to think about. I don't think anybody would be if there was a trade offer for Tage Thompson and Jack Eichel, 1 for 1. I don't think anybody from Buffalo would take that trade, and nobody would even think that that would be a thing to talk about nowadays. I
Nope.
mean, he is once he got the contract. I mean, usually you think after a contract year you're going to go down in production, or like, oh, Tage just had a good year last year. Why would you give him that long deal contract and that money? He's proven it. I
Yeah.
mean, the thing too is he's doing a great job of keeping this team together. Obviously, Kyle Oposo is their captain, rightfully so, just because of the guy he is in the locker room. But down the road, these key guys and Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, Rasmus Dahlin, they're the new generation of the Buffalo Sabres, and they're going to be the ones taking this team forward. But they're still all under the age of 24, which is nuts. So
Great.
give them a couple more years. They might be able to do something this year, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan Cousins, the kid line talked about, JJ Paterka, Jack Quinn, Dylan Cousins, they're a positive line. As a young team, I mean, they're under 22, like you said. That's really encouraging. To have guys as playing top 6 minutes that young and being solid enough to compete with other top six lines, that's got to feel really good.
Yeah, and based off of their draft they had this past year, that group with your Savoys, all those depth players that are just so young to be in the NHL right now, that is realistically your future. Once those guys step up into the league, and you have Tage Thompson in their prime, you have Cousins, Quinn, Paterka, all those guys in their prime, that's when the Sabres will be taking over the league, in my opinion.
Hmm.
But if basically to look at the division standings overall, obviously big upset is Boston. But other than that, and obviously the Panthers, just from our perspective, I think it's still kind of in the air to see who gets that 2 and 3 seed. And I think the Panthers will come up. Sabres might have a shot. Detroit could have a shot. I think Ottawa and Montreal is a clear out at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
what else do you think about the division?
Yeah, I think seeing Toronto and Tampa rebound after slow starts is pretty expected. I'm glad to see that they aren't tanking like it looked like they were. Ottawa, I think I was a little bit higher on than most. They have not lived up to that. Their defense is just so bad, and their offense hasn't meshed like they probably could. It's just one of those things, I guess. Montreal, I think they're bad. We thought they'd be bad. I think they're a little bit feistier than we thought. Caulfield has become quite a good goal scorer. So I think overall this division looks really, really good. I don't think there's any absolute duds at all.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what? I think that's the best thing for such a young division too.
Hmm.
Some really young star talent coming out of the Atlantic. So really good outlook right now. We'll see what happens as the season continues. But
Absolutely.
that being said, and talking about young talent, let's get into way too early predictions for offensive rookie of the year. And I'm
Hmm.
going to bring up the stat lines right now of the players with the most points. I think I know who you're going to go with, so I'll let you get into it. Take it
Yeah.
away.
So I think the pretty amazing revelation from this year's rookie class is Matty Beniers. I don't think that's a shock to anyone. I mean, 25 points in 33 games, 11 goals, 14 assists, plus 6 on the year, only 2 penalty minutes. And the best thing about it is his team's good. these aren't garbage stats he's putting up. He's leading teams to wins. As a rookie, a future first line center, that's so encouraging. I think he's been everything you'd want for Seattle. That's your building block right there.
Yeah, I agree too. I mean, this kid is slowly just taking on the responsibilities of being the face of the franchise, which is a lot to be, especially when you become a new franchise. And I think at this point in time, he's also around such a good group where he is going to mature, I think, a lot faster compared to some other rookies.
Hmm.
And I just love the overall production from this kid. It seems like he's got a really good head on his shoulders and he just plays the game smart and safe. I love everything he's done this year. I think he's a hell of a guy too, individually. You see the way he interacts with the community. But other than that, I mean, 25 points so far. I mean, not too shabby.
And only 5 of those are on the power play. So 20 even strength points. Very, very encouraging for them. And that just shows you should invest in some decent talent to surround your young guys with, right? They got
Yeah,
Burakovsky in the offseason. I'm sure that's helped him a lot.
yeah. And I think there's a ton of guys here which you could pick from for potential offensive rookie of the year. But I mean, obviously, Matty Beniers has kind of just taken over the entire outlook of it. I tend to look into more of like what a player means to each and every team and how they slowly get built. Obviously, Matty Beniers is that projected player right there, but I'm kind of a homer. I'm going to look at the Sabres a little bit and go back and talk about that kid line. You got JJ Paterka and Jack Quinn both at 17 points. I mean, they really have nobody on that line that's been a veteran. I mean, they got Dylan Cousins centering the two. Those guys are playing phenomenal right now. And I think that's huge for these two rookies. And the one thing I will mention is a kid in JJ Paterka. Nobody thought he was going to be on the team to start this season, but this guy's got a little bit of feistiness to him too. He's
Yeah.
not taking much from some of these older NHL vets that try and knock him off his feet or give him a bad hit from behind. He's right in your face after it, which I think the Sabres love, and I think the NHL loves to see that type of a feisty looking rookie. Obviously, we could mention a guy like Owen Power too. I mean, he's got 12 points on the season, but overall, I mean, he hasn't scored a goal yet, but he's just a kid. I mean, he's probably the youngest guy out there out of all these rookies, and he's getting so many minutes each and every night to the point where I think, Don Granato, I'm like, come on, lighten it a load a little bit for the kid. But I mean, he has been just asked so much throughout the season, especially when they dealt with a lot of injuries on their defense. He was playing so many minutes. I think he's done a phenomenal job. The only way I think he gets into the conversation, though, is if he starts putting in some goals. But truly, he is a pass first type player. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen.
Yeah, Owen Power, I think you touched on. He's got a really strong case if you look at some underlying stats. He leads all rookies in time on ice, and he leads all rookies in plus minus. And now, plus minus, of course, being a flawed stat, but at plus 11 as a rookie defenseman with only 12 points on the year, that's awfully encouraging. And you
Yeah.
got to feel like with the way the coaching staff trusts him to shut down. I mean, that's really something special to look at, even if he only has 12 assists through 30 games.
Well,
You got to feel
also
good about
too,
that.
I mean, you got to look at what the Sabres have been through this year. And
Hmm.
when they went on their 8 game losing streak, it's because they lost guys like Matthias Samuelson, who was Dahlin's man. They lost guys like Henry Jokiharju, who was originally Power's man. And, just through that, he's seen more ice time. Yeah, he's made some mistakes, through his young NHL career, as you are as a rookie. But on top of it, he usually makes up for it. And I just think for a kid who just plays so many minutes, I think it's, just well worth of us to bring it up and be like, this guy should be a candidate.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. I think it's important for us to look just beyond the stats, beyond the counting stats, and look at how much he impacts a team, and he impacts the team as well as anyone does.
I agree. So anybody else from this list that's catching your eye?
I think Jack Quinn we touched on a lot, and JJ Peterka. Someone I do really like is Cole Perfetti from Winnipeg. I think what Cole Perfetti's doing is really exciting because I think he's been a guy that we've waited for so long. He's always had this great potential, and he's always just kind of hit a ceiling right when he's about to get to that NHL level. And he's finally broken through and become a solid player with a new coaching staff in Winnipeg. 6 goals and 14 assists in 33 games. It's not earth shattering numbers, but it's great for a guy that, looked like he was maybe stalling out a bit. So I'm happy, and I think that he's got a nice future ahead of him very soon.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, and I think he's in a really good, scenario right now, just being with that Winnipeg team who has a lot of veteran presence there, obviously,
A lot
and
of talent. A
a lot of
lot of
talent
talent.
too, so it's a nice easing way for him to get into the NHL and slowly,
Absolutely.
find out what it's all about, and, that's kind of more my case going back to the Owen Power thing where it's they don't have the vets there, it's just a
Mhm.
young team, but yeah, I think Cole Perfetti, he's having a phenomenal season in my eyes just because of what they're asking of him right now. Not too much, but he's doing exactly what they need. And I think that's crucial for a team that's sitting second, I believe, in their division right now. I think really good job there. But obviously, I think the front runner is going to be Matty Beniers,
Definitely.
unless something crazy happens.
Mhm.
But obviously, a lot can change here. We're not quite halfway through the season. That will be happening in about a couple weeks here. So I guess from there we'll have to reevaluate and see where these rookies are at and what happens. But I think this is a really good topic to keep up on, especially to see how these young kids are handling the NHL level.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode here. Thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to try and do these more often, maybe twice a week. We're still figuring stuff out here, but thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you next time, guys.